Hello and welcome to the Scientology Money Project on YouTube with your host, Jeffrey Augustine. We're part of the larger SPTV network. I want to welcome everyone. Tonight we're doing a series show, and I expect plenty of trolls. So if you see them in the comments, they're going to get nuked. This is something serious. It's really about Scientology kids, second gen. And by way of background, Aaron did a video recently where he talked to Serge Del Mar. And I remember talking to Serge last year when Serge was first using the language of kids in hotels. And by that, he meant young Scientology Sea Org members. I mean, young, 13, 14, 15, having to listen to adults, a lot of men, talk about their sexual experience. To me, as a parent, that seemed criminal. And I think it is criminal. And there's some ways, some things to do about it. And I've been working for a long time. I have spoken with the FBI, the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the IRS Exempt Organization, Department of Justice, Securities Exchange Commission, really anyone who would listen about Scientology. And methodical work has been done. And there's been a lot of progress. Public pressure is important. But for a lot of people I talk to outside the United States and even here, I want to give you the context in which Scientology exists. Scientology is very predatory and it takes advantage of the system, and it enjoys protections from other religions that are also deviant in nature. So there can be, if you're offended, if you're a person of faith, you belong to a faith community. This is stuff you need to know, and I, if it offends you, then so be it. This is what is actually happened, and I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this for any other reason to bring attention to what's happening. And my own wife, Karen Della Carriere, lost her son at age 27, Alexander Jench. And we wouldn't have known had not Aaron Smith Levin, when he was still in the church, had the courage to tell us by Facebook Messenger that Alex had died. And that's always something Karen and I are indebted to Aaron for, and we very much appreciate that. And Mike Render verified that Alex had died. So one reason I started my blog and Karen started her YouTube channel, Surviving Scientology, is we can't bring back Alex, but we can damn sure help bring back the killing cult that killed him. And I do think that Alexander's in-law should have been charged with negligent homicide for letting him lay in a bedroom and die, rather than taking him to urgent care. In other states, they would have been charged with depraved indifference or possibly negligent homicide. But as Ed Winter, the coroner, told us, he was the only good guy in the whole deal because the LAPD was dirty. They were filthy. The two homicide detectives, I think they're scum. They wouldn't even give me simple answers on how long Alexander had died or how long he'd been dead. They wouldn't respond to the fact that Alex's father-in-law called OSA before he called the police. And OSA came over and scrubbed the scene. I still can't get from LAPD. And so this ties into Aaron's recent false arrest by Officer Tim Tallman and the general malicious conduct. I got a note from someone saying I shouldn't be live streaming out on the streets because it could hurt my reputation. And I understand their point of view and I respect that, but I live here in Los Feliz. Karen and I live 5 minutes from the Celebrity Center and 10 minutes from Big Blue. This is our community. There's LAPD Hollywood Division corruption when it relates to the Church of Scientology. So there's a lot of reasons I'm doing this. $35 worth of antibiotics would have saved Alex. He had pneumonia. running 103-degree fever. So what the second gen, third gen are doing is important, and I want to weigh in, and because they're going to have to pick up, my generation's aging out. They're going to have to pick up the battle, and there's a lot of things that need to be done. The public pressure ended forced abortions in Scientology. Aaron made a note that he has heard that you can't go in the Sea Org unless you have a GED, which is the equivalent of a high school diploma or a high school diploma. But they're still using child labor. They're still exploiting children. And so we're going to get into it. And this is, again, I talk to people who don't live in America, and it's hard to get their mind around certain things. And we're just going to start with some basic Constitution. Okay. The U.S. Constitution, the first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. Amendment 1, it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Basically, our Congress in the United States, it cannot pass laws respecting the establishment of religion. Another way to say it is religions are basically a law unto themselves. There is religious law in America. And now that doesn't mean they have immunity from prosecution for crimes. They can believe whatever they want. Religious law means that they can set up their form of worship, liturgy, discipline. But when it crosses into criminality, then that's another matter. And that's happened to Scientology many times. As for example, in Operation Snow White, where L. Ron Hubbard ordered the Guardian's office to systematically burglarize, infiltrate, and steal documents from the U.S. government. That was obviously criminal. And Mary Sue Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard's own wife, and 10 other leaders went to prison for that. So in America, religions can get away with quite a bit, and it's horrible. Another thing I want to make clear: people talk about Scientology's tax exemption, or 501c3. In America, you don't need 501c3 recognition to operate as a church. I just wanted to get that out of the way. You can just start a church, and you don't need government recognition. A lot of white supremacist Christian identity groups don't have 501c3s because they feel that it would tie them to the government unnecessarily. So getting down into the weeds, getting Scientology's 501c3 tax exemption is very important for a lot of reasons. When their tax exemption was revoked in 1967, they kept operating as a church, and they kept suing the government, and there were lawsuits. And that's time for another story. Tax exemption is a different story. So in America, I'm going to show you something else that people don't understand. So we can't pass laws to outlaw religion or tell them what they can and can't do. However, when they break the law, we certainly can do things about it. We meaning our law enforcement, the government. The Bill of Rights, Amendment 2, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right to the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, that simply means that Americans have the right to own guns. You could own 100 AR-15 assault rifles, and it's perfectly legal. People inside the U.S. and outside the U.S. don't understand it, but you can own assault weapons. So in America, unlike the rest of the world, seemingly, things go on here under the name of freedom that can often be hard to believe and accept. And one of those freak things is that Scientology exists. And shouldn't Scientology should not be allowed to exist in its present form. It's horrific, but I'm going to show you where it hides, how it does it, some of its people who help it. And I made the point in other videos that Scientology's lawyers, uh, Scientology needs non-Scientology lawyers to exist. The tech alone will not allow Scientology to survive. Without an army of lawyers and PIs, Scientology couldn't survive. So for lurking Scientologists, for you and OSA, you know goddamn well, without your lawyers and your PIs, you would have been gone. And without your First Amendment protection, there's nothing in L. Ron Hubbard's technology that will allow survival. In fact, L. Ron Hubbard, the way he designed Scientology, it's inherently self-destructive. And you know all of the deaths, suicides, all the insanity that goes on, all the violence, everything. You cover up all the essays, especially of children. You know it all. OSA is a criminal organization inside of a larger scam. So, Kim McNeil, the tide is turning against them. The second gens are finally being heard and their pain and abuse recognized. It's only a matter of time. I truly believe that time is closer than we realize. Yeah, the second gen is a deeply wounded community who haven't been acknowledged. And that's for a lot of reasons. And now they have social media platform. And I want to do what I can to help. I'm not a second gen. I can't speak for them. I don't. But I'm just giving my perspective as old guard. Like I said, when I went into Scientology, the old organization, the HASI, the Hubbard Association of Scientologists, existed. I went in later. When I went in, the IES did not exist. Hubbard was still alive. When I did the little bit of Scientology I did, just by way of context. Now, this you can pause and read. I'm going to put this slide deck in. But basically, in Western civilization, the Catholic Church came to power in 325 AD when Emperor Constantine converted to Catholicism, and the Catholics created canon law in the West. And that's a system of how the Catholic Church governed itself. And that included, tribunals. It created how to interpret scripture. That was part of the theology of it. It included the ranks of priest, bishop, archbishop, cardinals, the pope. So that's church governance. Okay, that's existed inside of all religious organizations going back, including the Hebrews. If you read the Hebrew scriptures, they had their own law. So religions have always had their own laws, whether they're Hindu, Islam, Buddhist, they've always had their laws. Okay, so that goes way back, the idea of religious law. And is religious law a good thing? It depends on what happened and what side of it you're on. The Catholic Church, this was the Spanish Inquisition. This was where canon law was used to torture and murder infidels. And then when the Spaniards came to the New World, of course, they slaughtered the indigenous tribes here, the Aztecs, the Incas. So religious law is generally, in my opinion, very self-serving, and it favors those in authority. Because when the Catholics talk about canon law being the oldest established system in the West, oldest established legal system in the West, they have to take into account things like the Inquisition. They have to take into account their battles against culture. So I don't want to get political, but religious law always has its own self-interests in mind. When you look at Catholic canon law, it always only has the interests of Catholicism in mind. And to that extent, it can be fascist. And that's why it's hard for religions to coexist in a multicultural, pluralistic society. Catholicism is at odds with mainstream America regarding certain things. And that's why the battle for the Supreme Court is so important. And I'm not getting political, I'm just saying how it works. Religious law in America is very often at odds with mainstream culture. And that's allowed for. In the Federalist Papers, James Madison said that a multiplicity of interests will tend to counterbalance each other. And that's why there's a body of law and things that are going on. But that's hard to get your mind around. But the Inquisition, the torture of infidels, was certainly part of Western religious history. Now, young people in the Catholic Church, this is a typical Catholic Church, altar boys. This was where young people were used by the Catholic Church, and they have been used for a long time, altar boys. And altar boys, not always, but generally, some of them are young men who want to go on to be and embrace the vocation of becoming a priest in the Catholic Church. So young people have always worked within their faith traditions, and they've very often been exploited. The largest case, of course, being the exploitation, the sexual R word of young men by pedophile priests. And that's to the total discredit. And the Catholic Church worked over 20 years to cover those crimes up. And that's not covered in canon law. In 1983, Pope John Paul II passed a new version of canon law, an update to it, and it's about almost 1,900 pages. Let's take a look at that for a minute. I want to just give you an example. To show you, I want to show you something that's really interesting. Okay, so now this is the Code of Canon Law, and it runs 1,900 pages. I'm going to enlarge it. So you can see in the Code of Canon Law, you can go through all, it's actually, I believe, 1,875 pages in the modern version. And you can buy a copy of it on Amazon. The Roman Curia here, the hierarchical constitution of the church. And you can go through this entire canon of Catholic law. And my point is that nowhere in the canon law will you see instructions to cover up the grape, the essay, pedophilia, sex crimes committed by priests. You won't see that anywhere because they don't address it. They hide it. They cover it up. So is religious law good? Again, it depends what side of it you're on. If you're an SA victim and it's covered up because you were molested by a priest, it's horrific. It's a nightmare. It's an abomination before God. It's filthy, disgusting, self-serving. So when the Church of Scientology talks about its ecclesiastical laws, what you should be hearing is we have rules about things that go on in our church, but the dirty criminal aspects, we don't put it in there. Scientology's book of ethics And this is Scientology, Introduction to Scientology Ethics by L. Ron Hubbard. It basically, this is nothing but how to destroy people. You look at the contents, ethics, justice, and the dynamics, the ethics conditions. So you go down through the conditions below non-existence, ethics in other people, how to spot antisocial personalities, ethics in Scientology organizations, the responsibility of leaders, which is a horrible policy. So Hubbard's ethics book, his church law, if you will, nowhere mentions arbitration, nowhere mentions how to cover up the essays of Danny Masterson. It doesn't mention the real crime that goes on. It talks about how to ComEv people, how to put people in lower conditions, how to crush them. So I'm not, when I talk to religious scholars and they talk about ecclesiastical law, I'm not impressed, because it's sort of like, well, yeah, if you're someone in power, that would be something, you know. Sparkling Dragon. My dad was an altar boy. He held on to a lot of not so great views for a long time. He was a good soul, just misguided. He has completely flipped his stance on so much. My telling him about me helped. Good. Pope Benedict XVI Ratzinger, Cardinal Ratzinger, was in charge of punishing and gaslighting sex crime victims. He was a former Nazi artilleryman. Yeah, Ratzinger was not dirty. And you can read about the rat line in which the Catholic Church gave Nazi, high-ranking Nazi officers in the military false identities to be priests, and they went down to South America often. So yeah, this is not good, and it's if I come across as anti-religious, I'm showing the worst parts of it. So that's just what I'm presenting today. And I'm a spiritual person, but I don't lie about what's gone on in the history of religion. You don't need to. And if you belong to a community that's bad, you should leave it. So that's the big code of the Catholic Church. 1,875 pages, as I said. You can order it on Amazon, but it misses out the part about how to cover up things, how to cover up crimes. I'm going to show you something that's really interesting. I lived here, I'm born and raised in LA, as I've said many times, third generation Angelino. When I remember the 1980s when the stories first started coming out in the LA Times about priests molesting boys. And I'm going to use some words the YouTube may not like, but you know, that's just it. At this point, I don't care about what YouTube. I want to communicate what I want to communicate. I'm going to show you something interesting. It took over 20 years, and this is something I'm going to. These are some questions I'm going to raise. People won't agree with me. I look for feedback, but after about 25 years, Cardinal Roger Mahony, the former Cardinal Roger Mahony, who's in charge of Los Angeles Diocese, in my opinion, he should have been put in prison for the rest of his life. He should have been criminally prosecuted and tried because he knew about the pedophile priests and he transferred them around. He was filthy. So he fought and fought and fought because the Catholic Church has a lot of money. And, you know, I'm going to show you him at deposition. They finally got him into deposition. This is worth watching. This is Cardinal Roger Mahony. He is in deposition. You can find this on YouTube, Jeff Anderson and Associates. Thank you for posting it. And this is Mahoney, like a deer between the headlights, because he's a filthy criminal who's been caught.
Have you become aware at any time that Monsignor Curry met with Father Nicholas and advised him that police might be contacted but before police were contacted.
My recollection was that on the Saturday morning following that Friday incident at the school, that Bishop Monsignor Curry met with Father Rivera to take him out of the ministry there and then, which he did.
And that was a proper action in your thinking,
Yes,
even before police were notified.
yes.
Why?
Well, because attempts were made to reach Child Family Services by the principal.
You've since become aware, have you not, that Monsignor Curry's meeting, though, took place before police were actually contacted. Is that correct?
Well, I'd say police or Child Family Services. It isn't just police. It's in this state and this county, your main reporting entity is Child Family Services.
Do you think it was appropriate for Monsignor Curry to advise Father Nicholas Aguilar Rivera that police were likely to be contacted?
I honestly,
Kind of pause there. Can you give me a 5x5 to let me know you can hear this testimony of Colonel Roger Mahoney? Just someone put in. Yes, Mary Smith, but can you hear it? Just put 5x5, please. I want to continue this for just another minute. Okay, thank you, Waynesboro. Let's continue. Yes, Mary, you make a very good point that he's splitting hairs. Thank you. So let's continue watching the son of a bitch, a cardinal of the Catholic Church, lie. Now just watch him.
honestly don't know what Monsignor Curry told Father Rivera because I wasn't there.
Okay, I'll put up the volume.
I really don't have an opinion. Apparently, Father Rivera said he was going to stay with his sister and gave no indication he was leaving. So,
Is there any reason that you can think of why he should have told Father Nicholas that the police were likely to be contacted?
well, of course, today that's our policy. We not only call the police, we tell the accused priest that we are calling the police or have called the police or filed a report.
Right. So it's your opinion that in 1987, on January 9th, on the Saturday morning, Monsignor Curry should have told Father Nicholas that police were going to be contacted.
First of all, this is January 9th, 1980.
Okay, I'm going to end it right there. And I'm going to post it on my blog. I'm sorry if you had trouble hearing it, but basically it's Cardinal Roger Mahoney, I think, perjuring himself on the stand. He's trying to make claims that the police were called, but that took 25 years to get Cardinal Mahoney in the Catholic Church. And of course, the Catholic Church has paid billions and billions of dollars. Some of its dioceses are declaring bankruptcy to get out of paying the judgments. So contextually, what's gone on in Scientology is not unique. And that doesn't lessen the suffering or trauma of the second gens at all. And I don't mean to say that in any way. I'm saying it's an endemic problem in America where they will claim First Amendment priest penitent protections. That's part of the structural problem constitutionally. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to read that because of YouTube. But yes, you are exactly correct. The horrors of what's gone on. Yes, and that's what that is what Cardinal Mahoney did. He hid, he moved people around, and the other cardinals did too. The one in Boston, who's the most nefarious. I just don't recall his name. Cardinal in Boston. Again, they should have all went to prison. And Pope John Paul II knew about it. And the fact that the Pope knew about it and had people handle it, that shows the Pope John Paul II is not to be venerated, why he was canonized. Really? You canonize someone who covered up pedophilia? To me, that's just disgusting. There's even a live stream camera of John Paul II's sepulcher at the Vatican, of his grave. So let's go back to get down from, we're going to move from general things to specifically Scientology. Now, so altar boys, we next move in American history to the problem of the Mormons. They like to be called the LDS. They were practicing polygamy. Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, the Restored Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was a polygamist. He had many wives. Brigham Young had many wives. And this became a problem for the United States government. After Joseph Smith was murdered in Nauvoo, Illinois by a mob, and Brigham Young took everyone out to Salt Lake, the government, the United States government, didn't want them practicing polygamy because that was a violation of U.S. law. And this is where we start getting from holding a belief in something to where you're actually involving law breaking, willful. Because Brigham Young basically told the U.S. government to go to hell, and he wanted to make Utah a Mormon nation, a sovereign Mormon nation. And after the United States had fought the Civil War and 500,000 people died, the U.S. government was not inclined to put up with any of Brigham Young's bullshit when it came to his having very young wives, very young teenage wives in some cases, or him having his own private assassins. And look, if you're LDS, you know the history. You know the Mountain Meadow Massacre. You know everything that went on. If you're telling the truth, you know the forgeries. So Smith killed by Masons for using the secrets of initiations. No, that's incorrect, David Bruce. Joseph Smith had his own militia, his own newspaper, and he burned down an opposition publication, and he had his own standing army, and he was basically wanting to control Nauvoo. He didn't use the secrets. That's just not true. You don't know. I'm sorry, respectfully, David. That's, well, you heard, but just in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a 32nd degree Freemason. I've studied LDS history. I have family members that are LDS. So just respectfully, what happened, to clarify it, when Joseph Smith was being killed by the mob with his brother in the jail cell, he gave what was called in Masonry the grand hailing sign of distress. And he was hoping that the mob, I mean, some of whom were Masons, that would prevent him from killing him. But Joseph Smith was such a violent person with his own army, his own armed army and his own press, and he was wreaking havoc. And like I said, he burned down a competing publishing house in town, and he was a threat. That's why they killed him. A mob broke into the jail and killed him because he was dangerous. He was deranged. He was a polygamist. He was a lawbreaker. So were his people. And they believed that they only had to obey God's law, not man's law. And the locals didn't like it because law has to stand for something. You can't have a religious community wreaking havoc and killing people, just like Brigham Young had his own band of assassins. So, so after going through the Civil War and losing 500,000 people, the United States government was in no mood for the Mormons to say, we're going to be our own community. So what happened, and again, this is going to put the slide deck I'm going to put on my blog. And basically, they passed some laws and they made they made polygamy a felony. And the Murrell Anti-Bigamy Act of 1862, you can stop and read this. Long story short, the President of the United States ordered the United States Army regulars, hardened Civil War regulars. The President of the United States ordered the United States Army into Utah. And if they had to, they were going to slaughter every Mormon man who got in their way or stood up. The Army was not there to play games or to reason. They were there to either arrest the leaders or kill them as lawless seditionists, lawless insurrectionists. They were going to, the United States government was going to go in there. So they arrested 111 Mormon leaders. They put them in prison. They disincorporated the Latter-day Saints Church. They took it out of existence. They seized their properties and they said, you're done. If you're not going to obey the law, you're done. You're criminals. You're not religionists. And that was it. That's exactly what happened. They took the church apart and arrested its leaders. And it's a picture for Mormon histories. Those are part of the 111 Mormon leaders that went to prison for polygamy. And the government basically said, if you don't come into compliance with U.S. law, you will never again exist. We've seized your assets. You have nothing, and we will continue. If you break the laws, we'll continue to arrest you and put you in jail, and you'll never have any assets. So the chief Mormon seer, prophet, revelator had a revelation that polygamy was no longer allowed, at least in the legitimate church. The United States allowed them to reincorporate as long as they agreed to obey the law. And they did in the mainstream LDS, but there was always splinter groups. It's interesting. Heber Jensch grew up in a polygamist family. His father, Carl, I think, had 16 wives. And Carl Jensch, during the 1950s, when polygamy was flaring again in Mormon offshoot cults, of which Carl Jensch, Heber's father, belonged to, Carl Jensch actually had to go to prison. And he would for polygamy. And he was let go. He didn't serve his full sentence, and the Jensch clan moved up to, I believe, Half Moon Bay up in Oregon. Warren Jeffs is dictating from prison, and he's become even more dangerous. Yes, that's FLDS. I appreciate that comment. So that's how the U.S. dealt with Mormon law breaking, throw them all in jail. Nowadays, young Mormon men and women go on their missions. And what's interesting is their families have to pay because the Mormons don't want to pay. We know that the Mormons, and I think it's their summit fund, have $150 billion in cash. That's excess cash accumulation. And yet they make these Mormon families already pay a 10% tithe. But they go out in the world, but Mormon missionaries have gone through high school. They have to be of age. They're not 14-year-olds or 10-year-olds like some Sea Org members. So they still do use young people. You know, having been in the Jesus Person movement of Calvary Chapel here in Southern California, I know that you can be young and very devout and very sincere in your faith. You may be misguided. You may be exploited. So I have nothing against young people who are very devoted to their faith serving. But when they get exploited by the adults or they become the victims of sexual abuse, then that becomes criminal. Or when priests prey on them, then it becomes criminal. So we have to break out the two things. Young people in America can legitimately serve their faith, but the minute they're manipulated, exploited, made to work 100-hour work weeks, punished, or made to listen to the young Scientology auditors, made to listen to all the sexual stuff of adults, that's vile. That's illegal. Now, Church of Scientology is trying to argue that these are ministers listening to priest penitent. But look at this case, getting ahead of ourselves. If an adult had a 14 or 15-year-old teenager watch a pornographic sex tape, they would be arrested. You can't do that. You can't expose minors to pornography. And I argue by analogy that that's what's happening when you have underage Sea Org auditors listening to older men and women talk about sexual secrets. That's the equivalent of exposing a minor to pornography. It should not happen. It's traumatizing to young teenagers to hear adult sexual content. That is traumatizing. It's damaging. And it's like Aaron said in his recent video. If you think a child is just a trillion-year-old Thetan in an adult, in a small body, rather, yeah, that's going to happen. And that's why beliefs influence conduct. And when those conduct becomes criminal, there's something you can do about it. So it's a question of how do we pass laws or put enough public pressure to where Scientology stops making this happen. Public pressure stopped forced abortions. Apparently, it's forced them to not use 10-year-olds in the Sea Org. I don't know. I could be wrong. Tell me if I am, please. So now, this is, of course, no blood transfusion. No blood transfusion. And this is the Jehovah's Witnesses. This is an older card. The Jehovah's Witnesses believe there's a verse in the what we call the Old Testament, but the Hebrew scripture that the life is in blood. Therefore, you can't have a blood transfusion. And this is an older card, and it's been updated. And Jehovah's Witnesses carry these around. So the position that the second gentleman made, I think, is good. Is if you went in as an adult into Scientology, you're on your own. You know better. 18 to 21 or older, you know better. I would say 21, but 18, you know better. So if an adult doesn't want a blood transfusion because they're Jehovah's Witness, fine, they can die. They can bleed out on the table. They're adults. They know better, okay? So, but what happens, and this is where it gets criminal, when a Jehovah's Witness parent says that their child may not have a blood transfusion and the child dies. This is the question. Why are parents allowed in a religious setting to subject their children to horrific conditions? No blood transfusion, no medical treatment if you're a Christian Scientist. Or you're going into the Sea Org and you're going to have to listen to horrific sexual content from some freaks who may have molested another child, and you're going to have that as a priest penitent. This is the horrible thing about children can't consent to contracts, but yet their parents can say they can't have blood transfusions if they're Jehovah's Witnesses. And this is getting down to the pith of it, as children should have rights. They should be protected by the state against dangerous things. I'm going to show you this thing that now there's been cases. Let me find it. Just give me a minute, please. I've got all my research laid out, and sometimes it takes me. I want to look at for this study. Here it is. Okay, so this is what I want. I'm going to share something that's pretty ghastly. You would think it would stand to reason if you're a parent, or even if you're not a parent, that if you killed a child through your religious beliefs, that is, you withheld life-saving medical treatment from them, that you should be held criminally responsible. That's my argument why I think Alex's in-laws should have been held criminally responsible, because they held life-saving treatment from him. They didn't do anything. They did not do anything. And it's appalling in California and other states. You don't have a moral responsibility to take an adult to a doctor, or you don't have a legal responsibility. I think you have a moral responsibility. So this next thing will, I think it'll shock you. It shocked me, certainly. Okay, now this is from the Pew Research Center. You can see it here. The Pew Research Center. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can read it. 34 states in the United States and the District of Columbia offer legal shields for parents who refuse medical treatment for children on religious grounds. I read that and I read, you got to be kidding. If you refuse medical treatment for your child, you have legal immunity. So if you're a Jehovah's Witness or a Scientologist and you say, hey, I don't want my child to have medical treatment, and they die, you get legal immunity. This is part of the context of religion incorporated in America that allows for things like child auditors. It allows children to literally die or suffer horrible, ghastly deaths because their parents don't want them to have medical treatment. I was shocked by this when I read it. So now you can see on the second slide below, these are states where exemption allows court to order treatments. So there's 34 states where there's exempt. You can get an exemption. You don't have to give your child medical treatment that's life-saving. The child has no consent. The child has no say-so. And that's the situation I think Serge is talking about, something akin to that. And I'm not speaking for Serge. I'm just commenting on what Serge and Aaron and other second gens are saying. I don't speak for them. I'm not one of them. They need to tell their own stories. And I respect that boundary. In some cases in the lower, you can see that there's states where the court can step in and order a child to be given exemption. That is the appalling state of affairs in the United States of America. You can own assault weapons. You can say, no, I don't want my child given a blood transfusion. You can say as a Christian Scientist, I don't want my child treated because I believe that faith will treat them. You can even, up in the Appalachians, even though it's illegal, if you want to handle rattlesnakes as a test of your faith, you can bring your children into those services around rattlesnakes that could kill them. So if America doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't make sense to a lot of Americans either. Why the court wouldn't step in and take over a child's health and safety is mind-boggling to me. But that's, again, that's actually real data from the Pew Research Center. It's dated 2016. There may have been changes since. And there was a case. There was a case where there have been parents prosecuted over time. And there was a famous one. Okay, so let me see it. And I want to bring you up to date. And this is something I want to show the second gens. So let me share this screen. This is something that just happened in the course of researching my show. Okay, now this is from you can see the date on it, January 31st, 2024. So this is very recent. And it says, Harrisburg lobbyist, that's Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, lobbyist, LDS leader, Mormon, LDS leader charged with not reporting child rape allegations. It is somewhat interesting that to the right of the headline, Marie Osmond, a Mormon, she's there in an advertisement. That just shows you how cookies are indiscriminate. So her faith, Harrisburg lobbyist, LDS church leader charged with not reporting child rape allegations. Now, this is important because laws are slowly changing. And I'm going to post this on the blog. But basically, it says Pennsylvania State Police have charged Rhett Hintz, a lobbyist and stake president of 7 area Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints churches, with being aware of, but not reporting child sexual assault allegations against a Lebanon County church leader. Now, according to documents, Heinz's church leadership role made him a mandated reporter under Pennsylvania's Child Protective Services law, which dates to 1975, but expanded in 2014 following the Jerry Sandusky scandal, which was horrific, to include more categories of people as mandated reporters and to increase the penalties for not reporting allegations. So one legal remedy is to work for legislation to make religious leaders mandated reporters, so that if they hear of a sexual assault, they have to report it. One of the questions I had, referring back to Cardinal Mahoney not being charged, I was surprised that in the Danny Masterson case, that Julian Schwartz was not criminally charged or deposed. I hope Julian Schwartz is deposed in the civil case that the Jane Does are filing against Masterson. But so there are some improvements in different states where religious leaders are mandated reporters, and if they fail to report, they're criminally charged. And I think that's one of the answers. If you're looking at legal legislative answers, laws that can be passed, religious leaders must become mandated reporters when there's sexual assault, especially against minors, anyone, but especially minors. And what it says is that Sean Corey Gooden, police say held leadership positions with the church's Lebanon ward, was charged in 2022 in Virginia with sexually assaulting a minor in the Woodbridge area, and 2023 in Pennsylvania with sexually assaulting a minor in Berks County. Police said the assaults happened between 1997 and 2000, and the victims were between 8 and 12 years old when the assaults occurred. So you have, to the discredit of the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints, things that happened a long time ago that a leader didn't report. And that's pretty vile. I don't know how you can say you worship your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ out of one side of your mouth, and out of the other side of your mouth saying, well, we're going to cover up this sexual assault of a child. You're not even a real Christian. You're demonic. You are demonic. You're self-deceived, demonic. You're brutal. You can't say that Jesus is your Savior. Jesus said, suffer the children to come unto me and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. So how in the hell can Pope John Paul II or a Mormon leader or anyone else say Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, but we're going to cover up the sexual assault of children or of anybody, or the rape of women. That doesn't work. And that's something where people who embrace the Christian gospel are just vipers. They're of Satan. That's what you'd say within the Christian tradition. So that's why religions in the USA decry the fact that we're becoming a secular nation. Well, yeah, no kidding. These religious leaders talk about how secularization is happening and we don't have Judeo-Christian values. Well, yeah, if Judeo-Christian values mean that you cover up sex crimes, cover up financial crimes, then of what value are Judeo-Christian values if it means covering up sex crimes? You can't have it both ways. So that's the hypocrisy. That's why people are rejecting religion. They don't want to be part of that hypocrisy that says Jesus is my Lord and Savior who forgives me, and I'll cover up sex crimes. Do you know how disgusting and contemptible and criminal that is? Can you even get your mind out of the schizophrenic? Those things don't go together. You cannot be a person of faith who covers up crimes. The sheer stupidity and the logic of that is, so it's organized crime. When you're covering up sex crimes, claiming to offer salvation, that's just organized crime. That's my feeling on it. So let's move on in the slides. So we have, in 2015, Val Kilmer, the very talented actor, he refused medical treatment. It was reported because of his religious beliefs as a Christian scientist. And that's perfectly fine. He's an adult. If Val Kilmer did not want medical treatment because of religious beliefs, then let him die. That's his choice. But he should not be allowed to make the choice for his children, nor should any Christian scientist. Christian Science believes that you should have faith in God. Now, as it turned out, he didn't die, and he got a part in Tom Cruise's movie. So I don't have any problem. I don't think, as a civil libertarian, I don't have any problem with Val Kilmer wanting to walk his faith and die and not get medical treatment. I've actually known people who've done that, who said, in fact, Dr. Gene Scott, if you remember him from TV, he had prostate cancer and he refused treatment. Werner Herzog made a movie about Gene Scott called God's Angry Man. You can see it on YouTube. It's kind of remarkable. And Dr. Gene Scott, who I met several times, he had the largest collection of Gutenberg Bibles in the world at the time. And I helped him do some lighting on those things. He said, I'm not getting treatment, and God will heal me or not. My faith is real or not, and I have to have faith. And he died. And I respected that because he walked his talk. Excuse me. It's getting emotional for me to do this. So Gene Scott could have had medical treatment. And of course, his wife took on the ministry after Dr. Scott's passing. So Val Kilmer, I don't know if he eventually got treatment, relented, but this was in 2015. I remember hearing about this. So again, this is the slide where 34 states actually, this should be unconstitutional. This should be illegal. Why in the hell do the children have no choice in the matter? Why doesn't the state step in and protect them? What kind of madness is it that 34 states will give a parent religious immunity for killing their child in the name of God? And what kind of parent would do that? What kind of parent would refuse their child life-saving blood transfusion? Why would you kill your own child because of your religious beliefs? Your child's not old enough to understand religious beliefs your religious beliefs. They don't have consent, and you're going to kill them because of what you believe? That's disgraceful, but that's the appalling state of things in America. It's like if you kill your child, that's murder. But if you do it in the name of religion, it's legal in 34 states. Can you get your mind around that? If you kill your child, that's murder. You will go to prison. But if you do it in the name of religion because of your religious beliefs, you get immunity in 34 states. That's appalling that exists. That's how twisted religion is in America. That's how sick it is. I guess after you kill your child, you can go clean your AR-15 assault weapons and talk to Jehovah about it and cast out demons. It's twisted. Now, these are some pictures I got out of, you can go to Google. I'm going to show it to you. Scientology promotes this happy picture from the Scientology Handbook Children based on the works of Warren Hubbard. So you have this happy child walking in the sunlight. Now, years ago on Xenu.net, someone posted this picture of this young child on RPF scraping crap off the sidewalk that's probably toxic with no personal protective gear, no respirator. You know, one thing, well, I don't know what he's scraping, but I'll tell you, birds when they poop, bird fecal matter has aspergillosis, which is it's a pathogen that will destroy your lungs. And I don't know what this is on the street he's scraping. It could be fecal matter. It could be meth. It's something filthy biological material on the streets with no personal protective gear. That's the reality in Scientology. He's in a lower condition, this child, and he's being made to scrape and work. That's child labor. It's subjecting them to a harmful pathogen material, microbiological pathogens that he's inhaling because he has no personal protective gear, no eye protection. You're basically setting the child up to maybe die, get pneumonia, get something fatal. That's horrific. This is from Sanya's picture. She put it on one of the blogs. This is the reality. Cadet.org, lining them up, programming. There's a picture of L. Ron Hubbard behind them. And that, again, is horrible. So I'm glad that the second gen are posting these pictures because these are valuable. These are evidence. These show what went on. We have more pictures. You see the Scientology kids being going through, I guess, Chinese school or whatever it is in their little Sea Org uniforms. The picture in the foreground is East Hollywood, Pac Base, where occasionally Pac Base puts on things for the locals. And these are not even Scientology kids, but they're trying to show happy kids being associated with Scientology. These are not Scientology kids. These are just neighborhood kids, and they put on an inflatable pool for them. So this is the phoniness of Scientology. It covers up the disgusting things it does to its children, the brutal, vile, contemptible things it does. And so you have to see through the horrific things Scientology does versus its PR. These are not Scientology kids, the happy, smiling kids. They're just neighborhood ones, as I said. This one, just take a minute and read it. So that's the conditioning at the Mace Kingsley Ranch. I no longer have my reactive mind. the child has no choice over how they're raised. And I wanted to show you, going back to the Harrisburg Mormon leader who was charged with not reporting. This is a picture of the beautiful chapel, or I'm sorry, the stake. And it's kind of, there's a verse that Jesus said, and again, I'm not a Christian, but I go back to my Christian roots often. Jesus said, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites, you are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. And that's what it very much is to me when you look at the Catholics, LDS, Scientology, all the groups that have beautiful buildings, but these are like sepulchres. Those are tombs. They're like whitewashed tombs. They look beautiful on the outside, but inside they're full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. And in America, what happens? Religions disagree with each other vehemently. You know, a born-again Christian would never agree with Scientology because they believe that their Lord is Jesus Christ and that Scientology is satanic. But both the evangelical leaders and the Catholics and the Scientologists all want tax exemption. They all want protections so that when they don't reveal sexual assaults, abuse, pedophilia, they can claim priest penitent, they can claim First Amendment, they can drag it out, they can try to hide things, they can force people into religious arbitration. And it's very well established. Just another thing I want to show you quickly. Okay, I'm going to share a screen. Religious law is so entrenched in America, and it is a system unto itself. So let's show you something here. Now, in Judaism, there is the Beit Din. That's Jewish law, and there are websites. So you can see this, the Beit Din, or the Jewish law courts, as an institution of Jewish life. And they cover things like divorce, and you can read all about Beit Din, some of the injustices that go on within that community. But again, that's allowed. And let's go on to the next screen here. So these are set up, and I'm going to show you another Beit Din screen. Beit Din of America, within the Jewish faith community, that's an online service. You can even schedule a small claims case. It's called Jewish Prudence. So it's very well established to the extent that they're good and fair and equitable. Because I know people who've been through Jewish law courts and had good outcomes. Some have had horrific outcomes. It's the same as Scientology, the wise arbitration, you know. So this is part of the larger system in which we exist. And so you have to look at the American legal system, religious exemptions, religious protections, and you have to look at where the law is broken. So you either go to the police or you try to change the law, or you do both. So over time, you work to affect change. Public pressure, Scientology reacts to it very keenly. And as we've seen in the live streaming, the church has certainly exposed its corrupt connections to Hollywood LAPD. It's also exposed the fact that it's willing to use vandalism, intimidation. So there's been one of the live streamers who was assaulted, one or more, tires slashed, things like that. So all the cameras, the coverage, the footage, the videos, you record, document. There's a body of LRH policy that I think a special blog should be created for by the second gen. where they could do a video and comment on how LRH policy translate into actual behavior and conduct. So it's just a matter of methodical work over time, documenting it, doing the YouTube videos, because it does take a long time. Under the Constitution and getting laws passed, it's worth doing the work. And that was the one thing I wanted to share with you. It's worth doing the work because change can happen over time in a number of different ways. And YouTube, social media is certainly very effective to do it. And so I just want to show you the context of religion in America and the Constitution and what has happened. I have a story. Just let me get one more thing. A couple more things I want to show you. And we're at an hour, and I appreciate you staying with me. And then, like I said, a lot of this is painful for me because it kind of some of the stuff I saw in religion, things I experienced. Okay, this is a group that was that went on in 1989 that I think they're still around, and okay, let's get that up on the screen. Children's health care is a legal duty. This is from 1989. Child Incorporated. And it says Christian Scientists plead no contest to reckless endangerment. So on September 1, Christian scientists John and Catherine King of Paradise Valley, Arizona, pleaded no contest to felony reckless endangerment in the death of their 12-year-old daughter. Now, why they weren't charged with murder, they didn't take care of their sick child. They think that God and Christian Science treatment would take care of it, what Christian Science calls treatments, almost like laying on of hands. Why they weren't charged with murder, I don't know. But at least this brought to light this particular case. I remember when it came out, it was a big case about, can you kill a child because of your religious beliefs? Does a parent have a right? Does a parent have godlike powers over their child? This is a case where I clearly thought the state should have stepped in much earlier, could have stepped in much earlier. And so they killed their child. They're murderers in my book, but to them, they were faith warriors who were having faith in God to intervene medically in a supernatural way. So when you start looking at supernaturalism, that's fine. If you don't want a blood transfusion as an adult, good. You can not take the blood transfusion, and if you die, it's on you. But if you do it for your child, I call it murder. So if you let your child into Scientology Sea Org, and your child has to hear horrific sexual details from adults or be even sexually assaulted by adults, that's criminal. That's criminal. And if you're a parent who knows about it, you should call the police. You should why would you belong to an organization like Scientology who tells you you can't go to the police? How is that even right? How can my question is, how can Scientologists, just like I said, Christians who say that Jesus Christ is their Lord and Savior, and yet we have to cover up rapes and sexual assaults and pedophilia. That means you're not a Christian. That actually means you're demonic. You're of Satan in that tradition, because if you're going to cover up evil, then you're not a Christian at all. You're a fraud. So if you're a Scientologist and you say that we're going to cover up things, then you're a criminal, because criminals cover up. They do what? They withhold. They withhold, and they not is, and they lie about it. So I'm glad that Second Gen are speaking out against this, and they're going to find some obstacles, but they can overcome them through methodical work, organization, uh, maybe form a lobbying group, an outreach group, educating the public, using websites, blogs, getting into media, getting their stories in the media. So I wish them the best, because it's an uphill battle against religion in America. So I just wanted to show you the expanse of what goes on. And I think some of the things I've done personally on my blog, it's been researched. It's a repository. It's an archive. So if Second Gen created their own repository where people could get the documents, where prosecutors could quickly get evidence or church policy, along with videos of how that policy translated into terrible things that kids had to endure. Line up your testimony with your blog. I'm finding more and more I'm going to, on my own blog, Scientology Humanity Project, I'm going to where I do a video and then I present the PowerPoint, the church policy, or I present the legal findings. I just did a case on GBP Capital, David Gentile, Scientologist, $1.7 billion Ponzi scheme. I just am going to do a video on that and then present the court document. And that makes it easy. So one of my secrets for my blog is to make it as easy as possible for lawyers, law firms, prosecutors, government officials, journalists, and others to get the documents. You can't get documents on YouTube. You can do a lot of great things on YouTube, but if you have a website where there's a repository that's easy to research, when you're communicating with a law firm or a lawyer or a prosecutor, if you have the PDF on a website and you can send them the link, the URL, boom, it's done. So there's strength in YouTube, and there's a lot of power in having the PDF available on a blog. And so that's one of my recommendations, is use the best of all possible worlds. Use blogs to post PDFs, use videos to give your direct first-person testimony. You were there. This happened to me. These are the people who did it. Name names. Give evidence. Post LRH policy. Post anything you can. So it's an uphill battle, but to the people who say you can't do anything about it, no, we can take down Scientology in its present form. We can cost it its tax exemption. And because Scientology is destructive, inherently self-destructive, it may cost itself its own tax exemption. And so that's it. I want to thank you for listening. That's my overview. Any questions? I'll stay here for a minute or two. Any questions? Oh, yes. Google Docs. Well, one of the problems with Google Docs is if you allow someone who you're not sure access to it, they could wipe out Google Docs. I don't like Google Docs. I like my blog. I like posting PDF. WordPress I use because it has a good PDF embedder. And so, yes, you can use Google Docs within your group. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Sparking Dragon. Yes, I have evidence. The FBI, yes, anything you have. I have sent so much stuff to the FBI and other agencies. Just send it in. You can go online and send it in. You can write it. You can give printed documents. I always like to mail in printed documents. And if you have specific questions, you can always reach out to me because there's a lot of different departments where things should go. So keep putting the evidence out there. Keep putting as much evidence as you can. That includes LRH policy, scripture, letters, videos, eyewitness YouTube, who did it, what happened, where did it happen. Flagland Base, March, 2018. These were the 3 people involved. I reported it to the Clearwater Police Department, whatever. As long as that evidence is there and it's easy and fast to get, you make it easy for people to help you. And that's the main thing as an activist. You do have your news service. You have your repository of documents. And again, these are things that will help. They'll help anyone speed up an investigation. It's evidence at people's fingertips. Interesting data point. On my blog, I have my evergreen things posted at the top. One of my most read pieces are the 4 Scientology contracts. Another well-read piece is The Real Death of L. Ron Hubbard, What Happened. Another one is Why You Can't Be a Scientologist and a Christian. So when you hit upon something evergreen, you want to get it out there. So anyway, it's been good work by Second Gen on exposing what goes on down into the church, and their lived experience is so important to listen to. And so I think I'll wrap it up here. Maybe I need to build a website with a timeline and evidence. Well, yes, that's exactly what you do when you develop a case. You should have a website. I like using a blog, but I think blogs, because you can add to them day by day, they're much better. But yeah, you build timeline and evidence. So it's basically methodical work. And I always tell people, be an internet sleuth. And anything you find that you can post, well, that adds to the cumulative body of evidence against Scientology. So yes, build timelines, and basically it's methodical work day by day. So anyway, thank you, Mary. Good evening to you and yours, and we will have a good evening. I wish the best to all of you. And one more thing, blog with multiple members. Yeah, if you put a team together, teams are dynamite. If you have a team of people who are committed to the same goal and you're aligned to the same purpose of taking down Scientology, yeah, blog with multiple members, have a lot of contributors, because we need a lot of different experts. We need people who live the experience. We need lawyers, other specialists who can interpret data. So yes, the more people you can get, the better. And social media sure makes it easy, because Scientology can't do it. One interesting thing I'll leave you with is, during all the live streaming, LAPD, we learned, has a social media team that's watching all of it. So other police departments do too. So when you're out on the street filming a false arrest, as happened with Tim Tallman arresting Aaron, that's evidence. That's evidence on the street. And that's one reason I go onto the streets, is I can film things that can become evidence. And you can do that as a private citizen. You're allowed to film out in public where there's no expectation of privacy. You're allowed to post things that are true. You can post court documents. There's all kinds of things you can do. You have so much power to do things. And all it takes is your own initiative. You don't need anyone's permission to start a blog. You just take the initiative and do it because you can. It's there for the taking. And you can make a difference. And I encourage you to do that. So, the Scientology Money Project on YouTube. This is your host, Jeffrey Augustine. Thank you so much for listening. And I urge you to take action to stop this vicious monster Scientology cult.